We'll call to order the November 14th, 2022 meeting, the Conestoga Valley Board of School Directors. I'd like to welcome all of those in attendance, as well as those who join us online. Will you please join me for the pledge of the flag? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kids are kind of
Nice to have them.
Mrs. Martin, may we please have attendance?
6 members present in person, 1 member, Ms. Trowbridge, attending via Zoom, absent Mr. Benigno and Mr. Hurst.
Okay, then we do have a quorum. This is our work session, one of 2 meetings per month in which we receive most of the informational presentations as well as discuss and deliberate future decisions. There are also some action or voting items required on a timely issue or to meet time-restrained deadlines. Our meetings observe the requirements of school code, legislative directives, original Act 84, the Sunshine Law, all subsequent amendments, judicial rulings, and our district policies to the best of our understanding and ability. All agendas and related public documents and details are posted on the district website. Are there any additions, changes, or deletions to the agenda
There are not.
from the board? I have one, and this will be ongoing. We're going to switch superintendent board comments. It's just the order that they're in. That being the case, could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? If not, we will move on to superintendent's comments.
Yes, Madam President, the only comment tonight is that Marilyn has filled my calendar with building visits, so we'll be getting that out to you if you want to join me on any of those visits, or if there's a date or time that fits you, we'll adjust as necessary and hit whatever building you'd like to. But that should be out by the end of the week.
Board comments. Any comments by board members on district activities?
We'll do it now or later.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do it now? Great,
Yeah,
thank you.
that's an
So,
activity.
I will do board comments. I attended the Brownstown PTO. They put a brand new sign, electronic sign out in front of Brownstown, and they had a big sign, PTO meeting tonight. I was in the mood to give something back, so I attended the Brownstown PTO. It was great, it's good to see the parents that are volunteering, et cetera. So some of the big action items were that the Fall Fun Fest was a success, that they had, and talked some about the numbers. Upcoming winter activities that's going on, and how they're gonna start tracking, how they track their via hours.
Okay.
No questions for me, I just
Really?
sat and just
I'm glad to hear that.
kind of listened, and they kind of asked why we track hours and things of that nature, and talk about
Okay.
it from a district perspective. We like to, recognize VIA members, and we like to track how many hours that are getting volunteered throughout the district. But no, it was nice to see Dr. Graybill and the rest of the parents, and just sit and just reminisce about when my kids were there.
Okay. Any other board comments? If not, we will.
I attended the
Oh.
bonfire here at the high
Okay.
school about, what was that, 2 weeks ago? It was 2 weeks ago. Great event, a lot of people. I don't know what the typical attendance is, but the attendance was fantastic. I think we as a board should discuss and consider having a formal presence at the bonfire each year. I think it would be an opportunity for us as a group or a portion of the board to be there, be present among the community as another opportunity to be available for questions or discussion.
I think that's a good suggestion. As part of our board goals this year, it was, attending these things, but we don't have a formal way. I try to keep track as you let me know what PTO meetings and such you've gone to, but maybe we need something more specific so that we're sure we always have someone that. But once you do that, they're gonna wanna recognize you at those things, so be prepared.
We'll have we got plenty of room for another table up there for meet and greet board members, plenty of room.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, we don't do well if we try to schedule just that, but we can incorporate it into things that are already happening to bring parents out. Okay, we'll move on to the student report. Mr. Campbell.
Mr. Campbell over here, yep. Ms. Strasburg, you wanna come up and, are you co-introducing or are you just cheering them on?
I'm gonna let them do their thing. We're very, very proud of the work that we've been doing at Fritz, and Mr. Campbell has put some of it together to share with you tonight.
Alright, this will stand. Alright, cool, you're good. Alright, do we wanna start by introducing ourselves? Okay, wanna say your name?
Addie. Hi, my name is Emily. My name is Avery. Jenna. Prima. Judah.
And they represent 2 kindergartners, 2 fifth graders, and 2 third graders, so we thought it was a nice mix. We are going to represent Fritz tonight and tell you about all the great things that we're doing, give you some examples. Dr. Z, you have our presentation correct?
I am waiting patiently.
I guess first I'd say thank you for having us here. Thank you for giving the different schools a voice and being interested in what we're doing. Obviously that really means a lot to us. This will load.
Can you email me a copy?
I'm gonna move, so you can see how to make it see it.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. I guess while we're waiting, we actually have something for all the school board members today. We brought our very famous CV Bucks box. This sits right in the middle of our cafeteria for every student to see. We lock it every Monday, and then the kids throughout the week, and you're gonna hear more about that, can earn CV Bucks and they put it in. And on Fridays, we draw for a building prize. And we actually brought a CV Buck for all of you tonight. And while we're waiting for that to load, you can even go put your CV Buck in the box. And then we're gonna make a drawing at the end for a Fritz water bottle. So, Emily, do you wanna hand those out?
Miss Groff.
She sits right there.
There she is.
Miss Capia.
That's me.
Mr. Jensel.
That's over here. Thank you.
Dr. Martin.
That's me.
Mr. Talley.
Thank you.
And Mr. Dillman.
Right here. This is the winner, right?
I don't know.
And if you guys want to just go put it in the box, that would be great. Just slide it in just like all the Fritz kids. Sometimes it's literally hundreds in about a week's time. We like to recognize all the kids.
If you fold, you have a better chance of winning.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Students earn CV Bucks by being respectful, responsible, or safe. And teachers and bus drivers and cafeteria workers, any adult in the building or paras, carry those with them at all times and have the opportunity to catch kids doing good things, and then they award students CV Bucks. And the one thing that we did that was really interesting was teachers cannot give their own students CV Bucks. It is other students, and so it really causes teachers to look at other classes or be aware of what other students are doing in the hallways or on the bus or things like that. And kids get caught doing good things, not just by their teacher in a classroom, but by all sorts of different adults in the building.
Do you adjust that every month to match the characteristics?
So the safe, responsible, respectful, we have, and Mr. Campbell's gonna explain how the character traits line up, and they do, to the CV Bucks. So looks like we've got our presentation up here, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Campbell.
Okay, so we just wanted to tell you quickly what's happening at Fritz. We don't want to take too much of your time tonight. So Dr. Z, you can go to the next slide. Okay, So about a year ago, we created a team at Fritz of teachers from various levels, support staff, and we created a new PBIS matrix for behaviors. We're really trying to get Fritz to be consistent across the board in all locations. So we kind of came up with how to be safe, how to be responsible, how to be respectful in all different areas such as classroom or specials, the bathroom, cafeteria, playgrounds, bus, hallways, and with technology. And we last year actually had students make videos, almost like how-to videos of what to do, what not to do, and we've been sharing those at school. So we're trying to get all the kids to be safe, be responsible, and be respectful everywhere. And on the CV book, you can see that when they're noticed for doing those things, the teacher can check, be safe, be responsible, be respectful with their name, and then they put it in the box. All right, we're gonna start tonight with our student part, and we're gonna talk about the J.E. Fritz Safeties. This is a program that Mrs. Strasberg and Mrs. Souder started. I just think it's great. It's giving kids that are fifth graders initiative to be leaders in the school, and I brought Emily and Avery with us tonight, who actually are safeties, and I have some questions for them. So Avery, can you tell us how you earned a job as a Fritz safety?
I earned a job by I took responsibility. It passed through all the time I've been for J.E. Fritz. So that has shown and proven that I am capable of handling such a job.
So they had to apply, and then a team of teachers chose the most worthy candidates, but they went back and asked previous teachers about their character to see if they were worthy of the honor. And then Emily, what are your jobs as a Fritz safety?
I give kids high fives throughout the day when I see them, and I just like to see the smiles on their faces, and occasionally there's the few runners and I tell them to stop.
And in addition to safeties, Emily and Avery are actually in building safeties, one in the front and one in the back of the school, but we also have 3 safeties on every single bus. They help the kids scan on to make it as quick as a process as possible, and then they also help the bus driver by being the eyes and the ears and letting the bus driver know when there's problems on the bus. We really, really like the program. I know they had, I think, 49 applicants for 18 jobs. I mean, everyone wants to be a safety, but they really do try and pick the best kiddos. Another thing we do is the CV bucks. There's one blown up for everyone in the back. And this is the thing that teachers and staff carry in their pockets all the time, where they can notice students being safe, being responsible, and being respectful in school. And then the students can put them in the box. Here's our box. This is more of a normal example. By Friday, it's usually really, really, really full. And then we recently, this is through a grant, Mrs. Strasberg, PTO bought us like a prize bin. So they get a coin they put in there. It doesn't work with normal quarters. It's a different coin. And then if their name is drawn, they can go down and put their coin in. And there's various prizes. Some of them are like a bracelet or a little fidget, but some of them are things like an ice cream in the cafeteria, and we draw like 10 a week. And another thing I was gonna ask today was, Judah, basically what is a CV buck?
It's something that a teacher is catching you doing something responsible, safe, or respectful.
Correct. And Dima, how do you earn a CV buck? Okay, what do you do to earn a CV buck?
You listen carefully, follow directions in the hallway, and
And number one rule, do we ask for CV bucks?
no.
No, the teacher will not give you one if you ask for it. Okay, and then every Friday during announcements, it was Mr. Rank, was our assistant principal. Now we have a new assistant principal who hopefully will take over those duties. And on Friday morning during announcements, they pick 10 names. So if your name's in there, you're not guaranteed a prize, but your name in there gives you a chance at a prize. Okay, next slide. Really, we try and emphasize Character Strong, which is our district-wide educational character program. And we really are Character Strong everywhere. We have traits everywhere. We have bulletin boards. We try and emphasize that we have so much diversity. So we have a welcome back inside of our building where we have welcome back in many different languages because Fritz has so many students from different backgrounds. Next question was, Avery, what do you think Character Strong is?
Character strong is what you like if you help a friend or if you help someone that's basically not a stranger to you. Character strong is helping them, being kind to them, and like respecting them.
Okay, and Emily, what do we do with Character Strong
We
efforts?
have assemblies and lessons online that kids can watch, and our teachers talk about them with us.
Right. So in class every week, we try and have class meetings. We try and have time where we use Character Strong, which is a national program, and we're really enforcing these character traits, which are our CB character traits. All right, now you were asking about the character traits, Mrs. Groff. So we try and recognize up to 4 students per homeroom per month who we feel are showing and demonstrating these character traits. And I brought along Jenna and Emily today.
Addie.
And Addie, okay. And they were recent recipients in kindergarten in Mrs. Singloff's class of the Student of the Month Award. So Jenna, can you hold up your certificate for them to see? So Jenna won what month? What was your character trait? Can you see what it says on there?
Responsible.
She's respect, and Addie, what are you?
Responsible.
And they're actually classmates, and they have Mrs. Singloff. So, how did you feel when you earned your Student of the Month certificate?
Happy.
Addie?
Happy and proud of myself.
Okay. All right. We really like to recognize the students. They stand up at assemblies. Mr. Swift, our gym teacher, has a bulletin board where he posts every person who's a Student of the Month, and we're hoping that fills up by the end of the year. We really believe in community at Fritz. We recently had a very successful trunk or treat. So many families came out, they dressed up, the parents dress up, they decorate trunks. We had our first live assembly, I believe 2 Fridays ago, with almost 600 kids in our school, everyone pretty much wearing red or blue or something that said Fritz. We do pizza delivery night, which is a huge fundraiser for our PTO, where parents sign up or their families sign up to have teachers deliver their pizza, and instead of tipping the driver, they tip their teacher for bringing their pizza, and we raise a lot of money for that. Mr. Rank, when he was our assistant principal, was constantly around, and I had a boy in my class who was his best buddy, and we took a picture the one day, but the teachers are out, teachers are happy, the kids are happy, and it's something I brought with me as a project I've been working on with Mrs. Strasberg this year, where we're just trying to recognize all the kids. So I've slowly met over 100 students at Fritz, and I take all of their pictures, it's like a Polaroid, and I ask them 3 questions. What is your name? What is your favorite thing about Fritz? And what is your hope for the future? We are currently working on getting a huge bulletin board somewhere central in Fritz where we're literally gonna post every kid so they all can feel like part of something big and great. Oh, and it's time for the winner. All right, Jenna, do you want to pick the winner? Okay, so you're gonna come over here. All right, so all your names are in here. This is what we do every Friday. All right, Jenna. There you go. Let's pick a winner. Okay, here's the big winner tonight. It is Dr. Martin.
Thank you.
And that's all from Fritz. Thank you for having us.
Any questions for Mr. Campbell? I have one. Somebody handed me a little coupon that says it's worth $1. I wanna know where my dollar is.
I think it's we call them a CV book, so.
Oh,
That's a great idea. Who, was it a brainstorming session that thought of that?
I believe it was Mrs. Strasberg and our PBIS team. We just wanted a way to recognize kids,
Sure.
especially ones not in our homeroom.
it's great.
I love it. Thank you.
That's a good idea.
You're welcome.
I love
Thank
the,
you again for having
I love
us.
the safety patrol. That brings back some
I love
memories
safety
of
patrol, yeah.
the last
It does.
century.
And I think it's great how 5th graders are stepping up and doing that, where before it was 6th graders.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. They're the big man on campus.
Yeah, we were
now.
talking about that
Big
when
man
we were
on
doing that,
campus.
6th, 7th, 8th, safety patrol, 6th graders. It's nice to see them step up.
Well,
Take this
I think you
responsibility, so.
don't know how much a child's capable of until you give them the
You do not.
opportunity.
and never underestimate an elementary school person.
That's for
Ever.
sure, ever, yeah. Are there any comments from the public related to agenda items at this point in the meeting? If not, we will move on to our regular action discussion agenda, starting with a review of our local audit. Mr. Markham?
Hi.
Hi,
It's going.
welcome.
Do you want me to sit or?
Whatever you want.
It's up to you.
Whatever's more comfortable for you. Didn't know if I had to be close to this. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Stuart Morcom from BBD. Here to present the audit. So you should all have a copy of it in front of you. And if you want to start on page 1, right after the table of contents. And if you want to move ahead to slide number 2, Dr. Z. So this slide is a summary of the independent auditor's report that is on pages 1 through 3 here. So this year we have an unmodified or clean opinion as we have in prior years with no findings on internal controls. And also, as we'll see later on, no findings in the single audit either. I did want to point out that some things have changed in the auditor's report. Specifically, halfway down the first page, there is a change in accounting principle, and that is due to the new GASB statement, which now includes lease liabilities to be included for operating leases. They're now included as liabilities and assets, when in the past it was just capital leases. In addition to that, the report is now 3 pages long. They added some additional paragraphs and reworded most of it, if you'd like to look at it in detail. Does anyone have any questions on the auditor's report? Okay, all right, and if you want to move to the next slide, and if you want to follow along, you can go to page 54 to look at the budget comparison schedule. So this slide is a summary of the budget comparison schedule, and you have your revenues on the first line there. They had a positive variance over in the rightmost column of about $1.9 million, so that means your revenues were higher than budgeted. And then expenditures had a positive variance of $193,000, so your expenditures were lower than budgeted. And then other financing sources and uses netted together had a negative variance of $787,000. That was largely due to the transfers out to the capital projects fund that were approved because they were not budgeted for. And so you get down to the bottom there, you had a positive overall budget variance of $1.3 million. And your actual change in fund balance after the transfer to the capital projects fund was at $737,000. You add that to your beginning fund balance, and you have an ending fund balance of just under $16.5 million, which we'll look at in detail in the next slide. Actually, if you could stay on that one for a second. I just wanted to go into detail a little bit on the revenues and why you had a variance there. Mainly the local source revenue, which is your tax revenue, had a $1.9 million positive variance. That was due to EIT collections being $1 million more than expected. I've seen that in a lot of districts. There's just jobs are picking back up after COVID and wage rates are increasing rapidly. So that has increased EIT beyond what was budgeted at a lot of places. In addition, real estate transfer tax, which is always tricky to predict, was $500,000 higher than budgeted. And state funding was also higher than budgeted, and that was due to the state budget not being passed until after your budget was passed, if you remember that. So the basic education funding came in just over $500,000 higher than expected. And federal sources were $360,000 negative variance, but that is offset in expenses. That was due to ESSER budgeting. It's hard to predict with these ESSER grants because they go across several years. It's hard to predict exactly what year the expense and revenue is going to hit. But that negative variance is offset by a positive variance in expenses, essentially. And for expenses, as you can see, you're pretty close to being spot on with 193 positive variance. But a few things that Adele did point out in the MD&A section, if you want to look at that, were that salaries were under budget by about $312,000. Healthcare was about $184,000 over budget, which, with the healthcare situation, increasing rates, and also just the unpredictability of it, is a pretty good spot on hit there, but you really can't estimate it exactly. Energy costs were $259,000 over what it was expected due to increasing rates. And contracted employee costs across the board were $450,000 under due to staffing shortages, just not being able to fill those positions. Does anyone have any questions on any of those items? Anything else related to the budget performance? All right, and we can move to the next slide now. All right, so this is what makes up that 16.5 million fund balance, and if you wanted to see the rest of the balance sheet, it's on page 19. But here we have the components of that 16.5 million. We have 95,000 of prepaid expenses. You already paid that. It's not available for usage. And then we have all the amounts that the board has committed. We have retirement rate stabilization, which is obviously a factor with the increasing PSERS rates. We have health savings accounts, future debt service obligations, amounts to balance future budgets, personnel costs, which were committed this year, and COVID-19 related expenditures as well. And then also management has assigned amounts for assessment appeals and the tax increment financing. And if you subtract all of those amounts, you get what's left over, which is the unassigned amount, which is required to be less than 8% by PDE, and it is 7.95%, 8% of your next year budget. So, and it's at 7.95. Does anybody have any questions about the fund balance assignments or commitments, anything? All right, if you want to go to the next slide, this is just a summary of your capital projects fund performance. If you want to see the rest of the income statement, it's on page 21. So this shows the two different parts of the capital fund that's shown on page 21, the capital reserve and the capital projects. The capital reserve had a small amount of interest income during the year. And it also had the transfer in from the general fund surplus, that's the $1,650,000. So in total, it increased by about 1.6 million, leaving you at about 5.5 million. And with capital projects, as you can see, there's a lot of ins and outs there. There was a bond issuance, that's the other financing source of about 45 million, and then 28 million was your capital expenditures for the year, which of course was the new middle school and renovations to Brownstown. So at the end of the year, you still have 64 million in the capital projects fund, which is obviously a lot of that has already been expended with the middle school project. And then the 5.5 in the capital reserve is, essentially what you've put away from general fund surpluses in the past that's sitting there ready to be spent on capital projects. Does anyone have any questions on any of that? All right.
We go back to the last slide you gave us. What page would I find the detail of that on?
So the whole income statement is on page 21, but
No, from the last slide,
19.
19.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. This is just the annual update for the PSERS net pension liability. As you know, the contribution rates have been increasing dramatically over the past decade or so. In the current year, in 22-23, they're at 35.62% of every dollar paid to an employee who's eligible for PSERS. Thankfully, it looks like we only have about 2% left to run, at least as far as they've projected it, and that can always change. the PSERS liability is a year behind your year end, so the PSERS liability recorded on your statements is as of July 30th, 2021, and it decreased by about 14 million down to 87 million. And that was due to the fact that the investment losses that have occurred in the past year have not hit yet because they're a year behind. So we expect the liability to go up again next year, and that may have a positive, or it may have a effect on the future PSERS employment contribution rates. So you may be seeing higher rates in the future, but it's hard to tell with so many factors going into it, and the market could turn around in the next year. But these are the rates that are projected as of right now, so hopefully nothing too dramatic as we've seen in the past decade or so. Does anyone have any questions on the PSERS liability? All right.
Is the well-publicized problems they're having at PSERS going to have much impact on these numbers?
I don't believe so. These projections were made after the majority of that was settled. I believe it's pretty much settled at this point. I don't know the exact outcome of it, but
All I know is nobody was held responsible.
yeah, that's essentially what I heard as well. It's I'd like to know what was going on in PSERS, but yeah. But yeah, I can't really give any more insight as to that. And then this next slide is just a summary of what's on page 74, and this is what's summarizing the findings of our single audit. Because CV spends more than $750,000 in federal funds, they require a single audit. And we tested the child nutrition program, or the school lunch program, and we had an unmodified opinion. We did not have any findings or internal controls findings. In addition here, we also like to summarize that the AFR was filed on October 31st, and then the financial statements, after you approve them, will be filed with your bond agents to continue that disclosure. And then we actually already filed the single audit with the audit clearinghouse. Any questions on any of that? All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for.
There's one number I'd like, I don't see here,
Yeah.
on the assigned balances, you mentioned property tax assessment appeals and TIF. Could we have just the TIF number?
Based on memory.
You can get it to me later, just something I like to keep track of.
I'm gonna say it's about $500,000. Originally, the assessment appeals was $1,850,000. So the increase would have been about $500,000 for ongoing TIFs.
For just this year?
No, for ongoing, multiple years.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, I knew for the total, I was hoping to get this year, the last year's number.
Last year's number that we paid for the TIF was about $140,000.
Thank you.
You could break that out next year.
Yeah, I think the total is in the high 400,000. Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Storm.
Thanks, Sal.
Next issue is a policy review, Dr. Z.
Yes, Madam President, we met last week, we being Tara Flick from CVEA, and Jill, and Phil was unable to attend, but he did review the revisions that we sent to them. What we looked at for the student teacher and interns is we did not have specifically spelled out for those student teachers and the interns the arrest or conviction reporting requirements. So it's perfectly clear that they have to report within 72 hours if they've been arrested for any reason. Other than that, we liked it the way it was. We just wanted to bring that to their attention, that they're responsible for notifying the school district. Any questions on that one? Good, okay. Code of ethics, we are recommending that we delete this. This is right out of school code. And every teacher is well aware that there is a code of ethics that needs to be followed. So it's just redundancy, so we have taken it out.
Aren't there one or two other documents also in state law that reference professional ethics?
It does.
I was wondering if we didn't need a policy that just, make reference to what documents are necessary, or at least make
Okay.
sure that it's in, if not listed here, I think there are two other ones, they have some long titles. I just like assurance that it's in their employee handbook.
But if you have an issue, wouldn't you want to fall back on a policy?
You could fall back on school code.
You can fall back to school code.
Yeah.
That has authority over anything we would add.
Okay.
As I remember having read over them in the past, they're pretty,
Detailed?
they're
Alright.
detailed, they pretty much say what you can't do.
Okay.
Some of them are behavioral, some of them are more legal, but I think, if I'm correct, there are two other ones. And by the way, one of them refers to educators, and that includes board members. So maybe we should all read that while we're at it.
Okay. Suspensions, furloughs, and layoffs. We went through this one and we found no recommended changes to this one. And a lot of it, where it comes from school code, it is a policy that needs to be articulated at the local level to make sure that everybody understands that there are reasons for a furlough or reasons for, the suspension here is not a discipline suspension. A suspension would be a reduction in time from full-time to half-time, so you're suspended to half-time. So again, every district is different how or when they use the school code language. That's why we have it kept as a board policy for us. And then the final one for HIPAA, we defined what an individually identified health information, what that means. That was not defined in our previous policy. Other than that, it is pretty much the same with security. The confidentiality, we did change Director of Admin Services, which was the CFO's previous title. And it is now, so the compliant officer is the HIPAA, and that HIPAA should be HIPAA, Security Officer.
Any questions? Okay, then we will move on to item C. Mr. Johnson.
The buildings are now in Lancaster instead of New York.
Oh,
Thanks for catching that.
well, I don't know that it matters, but it's one of those things
I'll
that
be
catches
honest,
your eye.
I never read that part. I look at the
He looks at
pass
the
fail
grade.
and I look at all the.
Yeah, I was looking down that too, and all of a sudden, the
Yeah.
old caught my eye, and I thought we already had it from there, and that's when I noticed.
Yep, we did. They had the address correct, but not the town.
The wrong town.
So we got that corrected, but, good results out of both the high school and the old middle school. It's odd to say old middle school, it's really not that old, but,
Yeah, the old ones over in
that,
Muir.
correct. So, yeah, so good results on both the copper and the lead testing from those buildings. I wasn't expecting anything different, but you never know.
Have we ever had a problem with any of those?
I had a couple at Smoketown that were just like over the minimum. And we did some retesting, checked everything out. I think it was just,
You're much older pipes over there.
it might have just been just an odd,
Yeah.
reaction, or, we just flushed the pipes out, made sure there were no, I had our plumber look at it, go through, check all the connections, make sure there was nothing really evident. And, it may have been a case where it was just a location that wasn't used very often.
And it accumulated.
Yeah, and it just residuals, and some of it could be coming from the city, because that's also city water as well over there.
Oh, that's right.
Mhm.
That's right. Okay, any questions? If not, we'll move on to the change order.
And I'll stay here for that. So,
Oh,
this
we
one's
did that
pretty
on
simple,
purpose.
it's a credit change order. There was some ductwork testing that we're getting a credit back, from them not doing it. They're basically providing all the testing anyway, but then when they turn the unit on, if there's air leaking out of it, because of the way the systems are up there, they're very accessible to get to, they're just making those corrections, so it's saving us some money.
Good.
So,
That's it. Always interested in the credit.
all right, yeah, me as well.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Z, position changes.
We have a number of position guides that have been changed. Some are new, some are just renamed, or some are moving zones. Because of the new middle school being 6 to 8, we redid the 2 administrative assistants up there, the 2 secretaries that are working, so that's what those 2 describe. The human resources generalist and supervisor, we've been talking about them. We currently have a human resources administrative assistant for human resources. Tiana Bateson has been doing phenomenal job, more than an administrative assistant. She's really taking the lead, so it's really the work she's done is a generalist job. It's not quite up at the supervisor level, so we're still gonna be looking for a supervisor. We'll be posting for that tomorrow, and we'll see what we get. And the reason we picked supervisor instead of director, our last 3 directors have been under the impression that they're more of a director instead of a hands-on worker supervisor. So we've renamed it. We're looking forward to having a very strong HR team once we hire that new person. The business office generalist, when we look at what's going on in the business office, we have really cut the business office to the bone. This is an opportunity to do things more effectively and efficiently. Adele has done a study on not only the job performances, but the workload for each of the people back there. And this is a recommendation coming out of her. The DO receptionist and admin assistant, that's our front desk person. That person not only will be the receptionist, but the admin assistant to the CFO and to the director of finance. Child accounting and registration specialist, we've talked about this one in the past because Dawn has had to contract out with the IU to work for PIMS. This is where that person is gonna come, and we're gonna have them backfilled. Director of special and gifted education. This is something when we first talked about bringing Sarah on as assistant to superintendent for pupil services. Once she got a handle of what was going on, we knew that there had to be an administrator below her. The same way that Dawn and Jill have principals working for them, Sarah needs that buffer in between so that there will be there'll be better communication both ways. So the teachers now will have the consultants and that administrator to go to, and Sarah can work through the administrator and the consultant. So the communication and the support going up and down the chain will be much better. And the director of finance, when I took a look at the administrative, where everybody was on the zones, Adele was placed in a zone that was commensurate with a 10-month administrator. And the job that she does running the entire business office is not commensurate with a 10-month position, but equal to more of a director position. So we are moving the zone from her job, moving it up from, I believe it's a 22 to a 24, or it should be. And there'll be a commensurate pay raise with that. And that'll be on next week's superintendent's report.
Yeah, and that's we were sort of playing with this. Some of these would require board approval because they're new jobs. If you have the same person, but you created a new job for them, I consider that a new job. So at least some of these will be on the consent agenda.
And all of them will be on the superintendent's report because payroll needs their new job titles for the position, for the people, even if it's the kind of the same
Yeah.
job but different title.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Dave, of these 9, how many of these are actually open positions?
How many are actually?
Open positions that need to be filled?
Right now, we're looking at the human resources supervisor, the business office generalist, child accounting registration, I'm sorry, DO receptionist, and the director of special ed. I mean, I can't say enough about the ops office, the business office, and how they picked everything up. And that goes with all the assistant superintendents who've dug in as well.
Are we gonna expect any more changes coming down the line?
We never
Or is this it? And the reason,
No, that's a good question.
Yeah.
There should not be, position-wise.
Okay.
Personnel-wise, you never know,
You never
people
know.
leave or come and go. But,
and the reason why I ask is trying to stabilize the organization
Mhm.
for when the new superintendent comes in, they'll kind of know what they're looking at and dealing with and to see how they wanna do whatever they wanna do, so.
yeah, this will allow him or her to, have total faith that the business office and the operations office are adequately staffed with highly competent people.
I know it's been confusing because one thing Dr. Z has done since he was here is almost completely redone the district
organization,
office.
yeah.
And some of that's been done in steps, and sometimes when you're in step 2 out of 3 steps, you sort of lose track of who's where, but I think we have a much more efficient organization than we had. And, you know, times change, responsibilities change, you have to adjust to them, so this is the final change. I think bringing on that director of special ed was one of the last things we were waiting to put in.
So is there an updated board chart that reflects all of these?
Yep, we'll have a organizational chart which will be approved next week as well.
Yeah, what I'd also like in addition to the separate chart, there's nothing within a list of names to go with all those.
You betcha.
Because sometimes I just don't remember who's
Like a
doing.
new org chart with names?
Well, the organizational chart just has positions.
It does.
But I think last year he provided us with a list of all of those positions and who those people were. I think that helps us a little bit, especially when they come here and we get to see who they are, to understand where they fit.
Okay.
Dr. Kozer, we're ready for you.
And Dr. Mann.
I keep watching Mrs. Tyson and wondering when she's going to leave.
I got 15 minutes.
Well,
She warned me with the Eagles game, she'd be back so she could get out of here. And I wasn't gonna let her get away without everybody knowing.
I think you dressed alike tonight.
Did we?
Oh yeah, look at that.
Black and gold.
Isn't that something?
That's getting
Next time, make it blue and red.
Nah, it's like the Steelers. I mean, black and gold.
not the Steelers at all,
sorry.
but yeah.
It's not the Saints.
It's not the Saints for sure.
No, I would be wearing Colts blue if I could be right now, but I won't say that to the group of Eagles fans who will be playing Indy next week. Yes. Good
That's okay, there's always a
evening.
fight.
What's that?
There's always a fight at this end of the table about who we should be.
That's why I like being a Colts fan. I'm out of all of that, right? I'm just
Yeah, nobody
doing
likes
my
your
own
team.
thing. Yeah, it's true. Nobody close to Baltimore does. It's true. It's true. All right. Well, good evening. Dr. Mann and I are here this evening to share with you the results of our 2022 PSSA and PVAS. But then as we were going through the data, what we realized is it actually lines up perfectly with our annual presentation to the board on the major curriculum items that we anticipate for next school year. So as part of the budget process, in November, Dr. Mann and I usually come to the board, we say, hey, here's what we're thinking for the next school year, here's the dollar amounts that would go with it. And so as we were looking at our data and doing that kind of check on where things are, we realized so much of our action steps around what we see in the data are going to be mapped out in those curricular items. So we're condensing, we're doing 2 presentations in one to give you that big picture of where we are as far as our district's learning system goes. So, how are we doing on the PowerPoint? There we go.
Keep going, but.
All right, so taking a look, just setting some context before we actually look at where the data stands. There were 3 lenses that we took our data through, and we're looking for the points where these 2 things intersect, right? We're looking for the commonalities or the discrepancies between these 2 different opposite ends of the spectrum on these items. And so the first piece of context as we think about this is we're looking at pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic. We're looking to see where do we fall, where do we land, any major areas that we need to examine more closely. We're also going to be talking about growth versus achievement. And that's another point that we always want to look at when you're examining where your learning system's at. So we have our PVAS data tonight, which is going to focus on how much our students demonstrated academic growth. And then we have our PSSA and our Keystone, which is our achievement data, our proficient and advanced students in the district. And then that third lens is looking at all of our students, but then also taking into account specific subgroups of students. So it's not enough to just look at the all. We want to compare some of our other subgroups to that all to look for areas, again, of congruence or incongruence across the board. So just keeping that in mind, we wanted to share with you our most current demographics. This actually was pulled last week right out of our Ed Insight software. So you can see again, I know we've been talking about this a lot over the last year, but again, we have a really diverse population with many groups of student subgroups that we want to make sure are performing at, above, the all group of students in the district. So we're going to walk you through some of those pieces in the data review. So Dr. Mann is going to start. We're going to take that lens of growth versus achievement, and he's going to share a little bit about our PSSA and Keystone data.
So when you look at our PSSA data, one of the things when you look at us longitudinally, we're, if anything, consistent. Even with dealing with the pandemic and going through, you can see that this is ELA, that at the elementary and at the middle level, we had a decline in from prior to the pandemic to last year, and then slight increase moving up into 2022. So this is the as Jill said, the achievement data, all right, on PSSA. One point to note with the middle school is that it includes the 6th graders. So as we transition, so the numbers are a little off. When I say off, prior to the pandemic, we were 6th graders at the middle or the elementary level. So just one little note to keep in mind. So that's a. For math, you can see that we're on a decline. Now I was just looking at my numbers, and there is an error on this slide that I want to point out to you. And that is the middle school math. It's actually more in line with the elementary. So that on the 2022, while it's increased, it's not as drastic as it is there. It's more in around the 40 number. So just noticed I made that mistake. So I wanted to point that out to you. But again, you can see the decline and then the slow, starting to recover from that.
Dr. Mann, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
sir.
What is the y-axis? Percentage proficient?
Yes,
Okay,
it
thank
is.
you.
And proficient and advanced,
Okay,
they're combined.
come on.
And then here's science, again, if anything consistent across those years, looking at 2018 through 2022.
I think what's noteworthy though too is that other districts have seen drastic drops. And ours, we did have some drop, but it's not as drastic as others have been.
A Keystone, a little different story. When you consider our algebra, you can see a steady decline and a significant one, in fact. So what we need to do is, that's one of those areas we need to take a look at do a deep dive into the root cause of that. A couple things just to point out when you consider the Keystone exams. So these numbers here look at all the kids that tested last year that took the Keystone exams. So that means first-time testers and retesters. So are included in those numbers. So when you look at the Future Ready Index numbers, they're going to be different. Why? Because the Future Ready Index looks at the junior year. That's the group, where that marker's made. And so students, when they take the Keystone exam, they have multiple times to get to proficiency. And the state actually put in place Act 158 that we talked about maybe a year ago, I think I presented to you, that has 5 different pathways for students to achieve proficiency. For example, pathway 1 is passing the 3 Keystone exams. Pathway 2 would be a composite score, nothing below basic, but then a composite score of the 3 exams. So I just wanted to point that out. So when you look at these numbers here, and then you look at the Future Ready Index that will come out, they're not going to be the same because this is looking at the students that tested last year. So hopefully that makes sense.
It's
Okay.
not their final best grade.
Not the final, right. So some takeaways, as you can see there, that, consistent. We've gone down a little bit, slowly rebounding. Need to, continue to work on that. We also need to take a look at declining trends and take a look at algebra, for example, really is an area that we really need to take a focus on and look at root causes as to why that's going down and then what corrective actions we need to make.
So we're going to look at the growth because in some situations our growth data presents a little bit of a different perspective than that achievement data. And so that's why it's really important to look at both measures, right? How many kids are meeting that grade level standard proficiency, and then how much are we moving students in a year toward that grade level standard? So 2 different measures with 2 different stories, but sometimes they tell the same narrative. So we're going to take a look at our PVAS for ELAs. When you're looking at that piece, Dr. Z, you gotta click through some of my animations here. Go ahead, give us a click. Yep. One of the things you'll notice here for ELA is that across the grades, we were above or well above in most of our grade levels in the district in ELA. So again, this is 2022. This is hot off the presses. This just came back. It looks a lot like the data we showed you from 2021, that we're seeing our students make more than a year's worth of academic growth. However, you see the 7th grade ELA there. So kind of tuck that in your brain. We're going to come back and talk about that in a minute. Let's take a look at math. Looks familiar, right? Dr. Mann just shared with you that achievement-wise, our K-8 math, we knew was already an area of concern. Now we're seeing that growth-wise, it's not as strong as well. And then in a lot of instances, we're not hitting that growth standard in 2022. So that's where, when you're assessing your learning system, you're looking for those congruent pieces of data. So now we know we have achievement data and growth data that is sounding an alarm. So hang on to that. We're going to talk about some of our action steps. But notice here, the growth data tells a totally different story about algebra and about the Keystone, right? We just showed the dip with the achievement with the Keystone algebra, but we have well exceeded academic growth. So what we know is the programming that the teachers had in place last year, it was working. Students were moving to close that achievement gap. However, we just didn't get all the way to proficiency, but they were going well above what we would have expected in a school year. Just wasn't enough to hit that proficiency. So we still know we need to focus on getting students to proficiency, like Dr. Mann said, in that 2nd and 3rd try. But this tells us a little bit of a different story. Students are making progress, they're making growth on that assessment. Science. Again, we want to look at this biology. So we saw on the achievement slides that actually the achievement was decent, but here we're seeing the growth. Students aren't hitting that growth target. So it's one that we want to look at, we want to take a deeper dive into. And we talk about a root cause analysis or a deeper dive. It really means going into the data student by student. That this isn't something that you can just say, well, we need to buy a whole new curriculum. No, we are so many layers away from making a concrete, definitive statement about what that root cause is. We need to take it down to the student level and really look at our groups of kiddos and where they performed and what specific areas there were of need. So let's look at those subgroups, where we talked about one of those points of intersection being the all group versus subgroups of students. And so we picked some sample subgroups out just to share with you. Again, kind of looking at where those pieces line up. So for our students who are labeled as economically disadvantaged, you see the math in the top section, ELA in the middle, and then science below. And what we know from that is that the math, you see a mixed bag there, right? You see some yellows, some greens, Keystone, there's that blue there. But for the most part, K to 8, economically disadvantaged, it was pretty similar to the all as far as growth and the all as far as achievement. So again, you're getting another data point that's saying, all right, K to 8 math, we need to really be thinking about what we have in place there. For the other areas, they're pretty much on target. You see that 7th grade come up again for the economically disadvantaged students. We saw that in the previous slide for ELA in 7th grade for the all group as well. Let's take a look at our students with IEPs. Again, pretty much our students with IEPs, growth is reflecting what we saw with the all groups. Students are making progress, they're meeting their year's worth of growth in ELA and in science. And then we have that math, there it is again, right? In the 4th through 8th grade as an area of focus. Let's take a look at our L's. This slide makes my heart so happy. So these are our English learners, and we are just saying yay for our L's. We have all greens, light blues, dark blues, except for that one 7th grade, but notice it's yellow, where the other groups were in a red there, right? So our English learners are making tremendous growth across the district. They're making growth in areas where the all student group and other large subgroups of students haven't hit those same levels of growth attainment. So big celebration on this slide. So our PVAS takeaways, strengths-wise, we saw that elementary and high school ELA, we saw our high school math, 8th grade science, and we saw the ESL and our IEP students, some of our most vulnerable students in the system, making some of the most progress on academic growth. Areas we want to focus on, 7th grade ELA, K to 8 math, high school science. So when we put these together on the next slide, we really, is there one more back in there? No, okay. There's a slide missing. All right.
Leave it here?
That's fine, leave it here. The missing slide actually puts together the PVAS and the PSSA strengths and needs. And so that's where you get the biggest bang for your buck, right? When both of those data pieces are lining up, we know that it's telling us where we need to go. And so there are 3 focus areas that we saw. You have
It's a couple slides down.
Interesting.
I think it's out of order.
It got placed
down.
out of order. There it
There
is.
it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
So these are our 3 focus areas from the data that we were able to pull out. And again, this data analysis, just think about it as like that dipstick, right? It's that quick check on our learning system. Are the plans that we have in place moving us in the direction that the data tells us we need to go? You can see we've got math, growth, and achievement. We know we need to dive deeper into that 7th grade data and our Algebra 1 and Keystone data. And then we've got some ELA pieces, as Dr. Mann said, that were kind of on that decline before the pandemic. And so when we think about that, what Dr. Mann and I did is we came back to our comprehensive plan. We came back to the course that has been chartered for the district. We came back to the priority areas that have been in place. And we want to walk you through the 4 big areas. Go back one more to that CIAE. Back one more. Talk you through these 4 areas, because when you talk about impacting your learning system based on the data in front of you, it's really these 4 areas that you're looking at. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, about our comprehensive plan, and then what's in place to address some of those areas of focus.
Well, stay there for a second, Dave. go back, right. So as Jill was indicating, in looking at the curriculum instruction, assessment and environment is the lens we want to consider all of our movement in the future. And so how does that line up to the profile of a CB learner and the instructional model that we'll look at in a minute. So when you're looking through that lens, it's our learning systems. How do our learning systems tie into this? And so as we make decisions moving forward, it needs to be through this lens and everything that we consider. The important thing, I think, to take away from this is that you don't panic, as Jill indicated earlier. You don't just make changes. You look at and study what's working, what's not working, and take a deeper dive into those systems so that you stay the course, but you make those adjustments as you need to make those adjustments. Consistently, or consistent, if anything, which is not bad. I mean, it's good. You always want to be improving. So when you're taking a look at that, it's important for us to consider through this lens, what are those adjustments we need to make? Jill used the example just a minute ago of a dipstick. I was thinking of looking at when you do like preventative maintenance on a car, right? You're using the car and it's wearing down and you have to change the oil from time to time. You have to put tires on it from time to time. You have to change the brakes from time to time. But you're not getting rid of the car. The car itself is working. You may just need to focus your dollars at certain times because of wear and tear. And so as we get into these next slides, we're going to take a look at, well, where do we need to focus the dollars to make sure that we are improving the car, we're making the adjustments and improvements where necessary, but continuing on that same path. So when you think about our instructional model, that's all part of our comprehensive plan. One of the focus areas here would be focusing on positive behavior interventions and support, so PBIS. Right, so when we were working on the comprehensive plan, we already started thinking about some of these ideas, and so the PBIS, MTSS would be another one, as another example. So here again, when you think about big ideas, focusing on our standards-based curriculum. So we are going to be talking about how do we do that K-12 big picture-wise, as far as taking a deep dive into our curriculum. Balanced assessments. Again, taking a look at the assessments that we're using, whether it's formative and summative, and how those two different systems support each other in our decision making. And then finally, the personalized learning is something that we've, as a district, have embraced, but how does that tie into all of this? We want to make sure that it's all working together and supporting our learning areas. And then finally, in looking at flexible learning environments, the strategic use of technology integration. How are we using technology in supporting our programming as we move forward? Examples of that would be using the data to unpack how students are performing on assessments, looking at and using tools like Actively Learn or IXL, and how do those programs help with the integration of technology, but in supporting our learners.
So this leads into the discussion then of looking at next year's budget and looking at where we are kind of seeing those curriculum items go. You won't see a lot of math on here, and that's different than what we just saw in the data because that data was not surprising to us. We knew, you saw that decline in math achievement, which is why we moved up the math resource selection process at the elementary. So our elementary schools are working on, all the teachers just got together in the last couple of weeks. They planned their first Stepping Stones unit. They will be full on rolling out those lessons starting after Thanksgiving. So we saw that trend was happening and occurring with the math pieces, which led to the development of that textbook selection process to bring us Stepping Stones. So again, stay the course. We know we've chosen a really strong program that's based on a lot of important math concepts, but it is also really focused on personalizing the learner's experience. And so when we do look at any of that COVID slide, the opportunities within Stepping Stones to create a very specific personalized experience through differentiated options within the program, that's where we want to spend our time in working with the new program this year, is helping teachers utilize that differentiation for specific students who have those needs or might have those gaps in their learning. So this slide then, we broke out our expenditures by curriculum, instruction, and assessment and environment. And when you see the little superscript up there with E3 or T3, that's ESSER 3, Title 3. So these items are not new items. They've been part of the ESSER plan for several years. This was very similar to what we shared with the board a year ago as far as where the funds are. So not much has changed. And that's the really important piece that Dr. Mann said is the comprehensive plan we have in place, the CV instructional model that we have in place, the work that we've been undertaking with curriculum, it's good work. It's the right course. We are on the right path. We don't see major emergency fires from the data that we want to quickly change or adjust. The plans we have in place are, we believe, are right on track with where the data is showing us. So these are our curriculum and instruction items. I'm not going to read through every one. Again, these are not new things. Many of these contracts you've actually already approved in the past year. And then this goes into the assessment and the environment curricular items as well. So their last slide, and then I know we'll get into some questions here, are really those key takeaways. We are staying the course. We know that North Star is the profile of a CV learner. The roadmap to get there is the instructional model that Dr. Mann just showed you with those stars and the focus areas. We absolutely know that we need to prioritize the curriculum development. That was part of the issue with the math, is that some of our resource and our documents our resource in particular, hadn't been updated as part of the shift to the PA core standards. Same with our ELA. And so we know bringing those up to date, it's going to be critical work over the next couple of years. And then that last piece that we have really been emphasizing, we will continue to as part of the instructional model, is that whatever resource we have, that's not the answer by itself, because you can take any resource and you can teach it in any, using any strategies, right, that you choose as the teacher. What we want to really prioritize, though, is taking our resources and implementing them with personalization. And you can see that phrase at the bottom. We need to change the learners' experiences in order to change the outcomes for them. And so that's a big focus with any of our resources that we are bringing to the table over the next couple of years. How do we personalize that experience? How do we differentiate for each student's individual level? That was a lot of information, a lot of data and charts, so feel free, any questions, thoughts?
When you have a student considered economically disadvantaged, and that number was higher than even I thought it was going to be. How do you classify a student? Because a lot of economically disadvantaged might also fit in some of those. How do you decide where they fit when you do your data?
They fit in all of the subgroups, so any subgroup.
So if you add all the numbers, there'd be more students than we actually have.
You got it.
Okay. Another question is, considering the large number, and I assume large percentage of our student population, that in some way it fits into a subgroup, are we just taking are those that are in subgroups and those that aren't, and getting their test grades and ending up with a middle number? Or are all of their numbers over the same range? Because that doesn't really give us the same positive outcome. If they're all of these kids are down here and all of these kids are up there, there's still a gap, but if they balance each other's out, you come out with a good number.
Yes, that I absolutely get what you're asking, and that's when at that very first slide where you looked at those intersecting points of the all and the subgroups, what you're talking about is critical. It's that student subgroup analysis where when we have the actual Future Ready Index released, it's the only state data that wasn't actually released yet. We just got the email that it's in its final stages, but that will break it out by ELA, and then it will show you every subgroup, and it will show you, are their scores moving up from last year? Did they decrease from last year? I mean, that work that you're talking about is critical within the system. So as soon as that Future Ready Index becomes available, that's work we'll be doing with the building principals, and then they'll carry that back to their school teams. You're looking at the all, which is the average of everybody's, and then you're comparing the individual subgroups, because you're looking for those outliers. Where are the groups that are significantly different than the all? Why is that happening? What's going on? And are there specific supports we would need to
Because
place?
we do not have an average student.
Right.
Yeah, and I would say-
My other one is,
I
go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, I would add to that, it's also important to remember to look through various lenses. So we're looking at this through that, but as Jill just indicated, when we get the Future Ready Index, you're gonna look through that lens as well.
Yeah.
So to make sure that as you're looking through these different perspectives, are you really getting to the root cause and understanding, what is actually happening? Because some of this can be misleading when you look at the
Yeah.
numbers and you're thinking,
Yeah,
some doesn't
they
make
say
sense there.
about
So we gotta
facts.
look at it from a variety of angles to make sure that you're not overlooking something, or missing an area of concern.
I have two places where I have concern. One is middle school. I think over the years, we've done education in general has done a nice job with recognizing the importance of the basics in elementary. We seem to have that lag in middle school. I find it amazing that the students could be doing so well. It's the 7th grade and it drops, and 8th grade and it goes back up. Now, they didn't suddenly become good at math in 1 year. Something's happening there, and I always thought, I remember being told that if a kid doesn't have the achievement in 8th grade, it's really gonna be difficult. I understand, because that bridge between elementary and high school is so important. My question is, what's happening there? What is causing that middle school's lag? Now, we just changed our middle school. And it's not just about a pretty building, it's supposed to be about an educational institution. So you move 5th grade over. Now, is that part of the solution? I know whenever there's a transition, grades drop. So we used to transition them going into 7th grade, and their grades dropped. So now we're going to be transitioning them at 5th grade. Is that simply going to move that sag, or is it going to bridge it?
I would say it's probably more of a programming component. You may see some of that transition number a little bit go that way. But, looking at this, my thinking is it's more of a programming thing that we need to get to.
More
and
than
look
it's a
at.
transition issue.
Correct. I mean, definitely transitions are, challenges,
Yeah.
right? Whenever you make a transition. So that has a piece, but not that big a piece to play.
And I think they're focused on a K-8
That's it.
curriculum.
Right.
Yeah.
It's different from what we used to have, that K-6.
That's
Right.
Yeah.
And then the middle school
That's right.
7-8.
And
And
then,
there was that,
Yeah.
that may have caused
Yeah.
the transition gap. And my last area is math. I remember when there was all sorts of concern about literacy. And I was right into that, because I feel that's the basis of all education. But nonetheless, that doesn't make math unimportant. We changed the way we addressed math. We individualized it, we made the steps different, and we started to recognize that every kid's brain is ready at a different time. It's like learning to read. So my question is, what's happening with math? Are we putting too much into that? I mean, you go from 6th grade math into algebra and boom, all of a sudden things start to separate. Do we have a whole new way now of addressing math, individualizing it, so we don't just take a student doing fine in math and suddenly give them a 50-pound backpack that he can't carry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really speaks to the selection of Stepping Stones as that elementary math program and why the committee felt that was the program. So we talked about that concept way back when I was presenting on that about spaced learning and this idea that we're gonna keep coming back and we're gonna make sure that the math content in elementary is truly locked in. And so if a student wasn't ready for it the first time, the second, third time they encounter that, their readiness is more likely,
But
right?
what bothers me is being able to do the work is one thing, having mastered it is another.
That's right.
And in math, if you can't do the sequence, then you have nothing to support you. If this is all the better you're gonna be in math in seventh grade, you're not gonna suddenly get better in eighth. Because
Yeah.
the one builds on the other, much more so than probably any other subject.
I think the
And-
chance for mastery was the selling point for stepping stones. I know that was the big
Yeah.
piece they talked about. So I think that, I would agree with your assessment as well,
Yeah.
from my limited point of view, that I think that is the right program to kind of prepare them up. I can't imagine that I could imagine that having 3 grades in one building instead of 2, it allows for more ownership to take place for these kids.
Yeah,
That's not something I ever went through. I was in middle school in Texas, they had 6th, 7th, and 8th.
yeah, but that was Texas.
Yeah. Well, in Texas, you got below a 75, you fail. So it was just a whole different
Oh,
category.
wow.
But it's just that chance for kids to settle in, because you come in first year change, my last year I'm out. I have to feel,
point.
it's just interesting to me that so much of it points to 7th and 8th grade.
Yeah.
6th grade touched it a little bit and was below as well, but so much points to that 7th and 8th grade, the way we've been doing it. So I'm really excited to see, with giving them three years in one building, not just a brand new building, but a chance for everybody to take ownership of that. You have kids they're the new kids, now they're in the middle of the road, and now they're the seniors in that. They're the tenured players in the building. Given that a chance, especially coming off of a new math program that hopefully has a chance to build mastery. I have to imagine that environment, that kind of ownership, invested environment has to make a difference in these kids. Especially because that is touching whether it's IEPs, economically disadvantaged, English learner, and then more of an average student, or whatever you wanna call it, they're all hitting that same, it's all pointing at that. That's just interesting.
And that will be interesting to see, but it brings up, I won't call it a conundrum, but a challenge, because while we improve, and if we get evidence that this is working, meanwhile, we have a moving target. We're not now fixing the kids that already are through, so we are sending up into the higher grades more kids who don't have as strong a base as they should. So we have to make sure we have something up there to support that, to give them a second chance to be successful in their math courses. We can't just say, well, the good ones will make it through, the other ones will just stop after Algebra 1. So I would hope somebody would be able to tell me that the high school is recognizing that the blueberries they're getting aren't as perfect as we'd like. You know who I'm referring to.
I do.
Do we have that in place right now at the high school?
Yeah.
Well, we'll see that in our high school results too.
Right. And you do see that, so when Don showed you the Keystone results, that was just for 9th grade, right? When we
Yeah.
pull that Future Ready of the 11th grade best,
Yeah.
it's markedly different, 40-50% more when you get to that. So those strategies in place for all 3 of those Keystone areas, you do see the multiple attempts. We get the students into remediation based on exactly what they need, and they're succeeding, they're
It'd be
getting
nice
to
to get
those,
it to them the first time.
Oh, yeah.
right?
I was gonna say, go ahead, cause I have a different thought.
I was just curious, cause the charts started 2018, what was the trend prior to that? Were we increasing, were we doing the right stuff, or was it? Prior to
Yeah.
2018 on the,
Right.
your graphs?
Consistent. I mean, again, you have not anomalies, but ebb and flow, but it's pretty consistent. When the state changed the math, you see a significant drop, because that happened across the board, across the state, when the state came in and changed the math. What was the year?
2014.
2014, you're right. We're here, and then it goes down here, and then now we work our way back up. That was true for everyone. But beyond that, everything is fairly consistent, an ebb and flow to it, but because we can go back and look at probably about 2012, maybe even earlier than that, as far as looking at the longitudinal data.
And I saw that they're gonna change the science test from 4th to 5th, so that'll screw up tracking too.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
So I'm gonna get on my soapbox for a second. And this might be a question that might be a little bit out of the ordinary, but can you talk about how an equity audit would help you take that deeper dive into that personalized learning process.
Absolutely. So back to Idette's question about looking at those subgroups, right? That is one of the pieces that looking across the system, and typically in an equity audit process, you're gonna be looking at curriculum pieces. You're gonna be looking at the different types of assessment. You're gonna be hitting the environment. So really that CAIE, that is part of what an audit would take us through. Specifically, there would be a data analysis component where we would be looking for disproportionality in our data, areas where one subgroup of students would be very different from the others, and then you go through that root cause process to really take a look at where access or opportunity could potentially be a barrier, could be something that we could strengthen for subgroups of students. So an equity audit sets up that type of deep dive data analysis, but it also provides for focus groups. It also provides for really hearing student and parent voices and experiences, which that's the E on that instructional system, right? What's the environment? We can have the courses, we can have great textbooks, but that environment piece and receiving feedback on that sense of belonging is really important.
Yeah, there's so many variables to that equity audit and what it brings to the table with what we're trying to like figure out, like kind of the nitty gritty and where we are maybe going down a little bit and we'd like to go up. So I just feel like that needs to happen, and it's sort of like has been a little stagnant, but I'd like that to pick up for your sake, for you know, going through this process and really again trying to have every student be successful.
Right. Several years ago, when we were working on the KTO grant that Michelle was a part of, one of the things that we looked at and noticed in the data was the students, the transitions. You know, we talked about transitions, but the kids that were the mobility within and out of the district.
Yep.
You know, so, you know, making sure that when students are transitioning into the district, that we're doing everything possible to make sure that they are getting what they need at the level they need it to, you know, wherever that is, to help them, whether they're coming into 8th grade, 1st grade, 2nd grade, whatever grade, so that we're catching them where they are and making sure
meet them
that.
there and then
Take
figure out how many
correct,
forward. Yeah.
correct. So that's definitely another area of focus that we're gonna need to have as part of that whole audit.
That's a uniquely American problem too. A school system where kids come in at all different places.
Yeah.
In a lot of countries, everyone enters here and exits there. Ours are so much more mobile, but we're still obligated to make sure when they get in here, we bring them up to par.
Right.
I have one last question related to Matt. Do you think that the upcoming math and science standards are going to be an advantage to us, or are we going to have to do a lot of realigning again?
So I'll speak for elementary, if you want to speak for secondary. So Dr. Graybill is leading, again, part of this comprehensive plan, part of the standards-based curriculum STAR that you saw in the instructional model is preparing for the next gen science standards. And so Dr. Graybill has been leading a team of elementary science and STEM teachers last year and now into this year. We are going to be ready to roll with next gen. I mean, this process, because the state has given us adequate time and we knew this was coming, they told us years in advance, we actually could put the systems in place behind the scenes to develop those new curriculum documents, to have some of our STEM design challenges ready to go that are perfect for our new STEM labs and really line up with the next gen standards. So that team has been just quietly working, methodically building out that elementary curriculum. Plenty of time then to be able to train our elementary staff on those science standards. And in the budget items, I think there was a piece about starting to look at some of the science resources then that would come with the actual curriculum documents.
Well, I know when the last time they redid science, we ended up looking at them and we were just about already there when they came out, which is, you know, fine.
At the secondary level, I'll say a couple things. Similar to what Jill just said, you know, there's work that's going to need to be done. And as we continue to take a look at those next generation science standards and the curriculum that we have in place, But to your point, when Dr. Daniker was working with the science department over the years, I mean, the next generation science standards aren't necessarily new. I mean, they've been around. I mean, they've been sitting over here and the state's been looking at them. And so in anticipation of that coming, we've done a lot of work. And so the lift isn't gonna be that big or that heavy. It's still gonna be a lift out.
Yeah. I just hate to, make advances and then they, give us a whole new apple cart to deal with.
Can I ask
Okay.
one more question about the data? So when it comes to diving into this data, does this allow you to break it down by building and by grade and all that kind of stuff too? Okay. Because that's
Dr. Mann and I wanted to be here all night showing you all the slides.
no, and I know
you
that's getting into the
know.
weeds.
It's
It's just knowing that when we're saying deep dive, like that's the thing I want to know. Same thing when I hear like
Yeah.
equity audit. I want to know how deep does it go? Does it go like? Do we get to see it kind of a picture of not just economically disadvantaged, but also single parent homes? Like how does that affect? There's so many different things, or the buy-in level the community has with a specific building. You know, like how strong is the PTO at Fritz versus the PTO at Leola? Leola's had to rebuild that. I mean, there's all kinds of those other variables, like you were talking about, Diane, that can affect so many things, especially in regards to performance for kids. But then also being able to look at specific building, how come Fritz is doing better? Their sixth graders going in did better than the sixth graders coming out of Leola or Smoketown or any other ones. Is there just all those pieces? That's really interesting to me, so I'm glad that it allows you to do that.
The equity audit.
Agreed,
Yeah.
yeah, I know, I agree.
Do we separate out, middle school achievement by which elementary school they came from?
We can dig into that. I mean, we have the data to do that, or the tools to do
Absolutely.
I
that.
guess what I'm thinking is, I always go on the assumption that we work to make sure all of our schools are equal. Now granted, they don't have the same students, they all have different challenges. But if we need to focus resources or programs one place because of the configuration of the student body, then we should be doing that.
So what you're describing, I can't pass it up. What you're describing is MTSS, like that is the multi-tiered system of support right there. That based on your data, you've got systems in place where when a need pops up at a grade level at a specific school, we can shift resources, we can shift interventions to that need. That it's not a one size fits all. It's not every school gets exactly the same. The schools get what they need based on what the data is saying about the students in their building. And so that is where
You're not
MTSS
sacrificing the curriculum
and
as a
equity
whole.
come together. Yep,
Right.
yep.
Yeah. Another example of looking at, like, under the hood, right, like I can't pass this up too. So when you're looking at the standards and your anchors and so forth, so we can take a look at, so when you look at that achievement data, and you see how the student performed on a specific standard, you can actually go down to the anchors and say, all right, well, where does that anchor fit in the curriculum? And at what time of the year did we hit it? And how much time did we spend on it? So, you're looking at, well, maybe something was underrepresented, overrepresented, or we spent too much time on this, not enough time on that. Or when you look at this transition data and you look at when students transitioned into the district, now the district, but more into the district, did they miss that? And if they do miss that, how does that impact them on their?
Especially when you're talking about algebra and biology and some of those more specific things. Okay.
Yeah.
Correct, so you can really get underneath the hood and really make some good decisions.
So there are 2 slides on the strategies with dollar figures. Are you comfortable that you have the resources you need to move the needle and move it quickly enough in the areas?
ESSER has provided the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do this work, to do a system redesign in a lot of areas. The funding is there. We've been able to contract with, for example, Dr. Rao with our ESL coaching, working with the IU. So we've been able to bring in spec with PBIS. We could not do all this work in the short amount of time. It has helped tremendously to have that latitude to be able to bring in the experts, which they are just accelerating these processes. Yeah, and truly ESSER has afforded us this phenomenal opportunity. It would have taken years to move where we needed to go without this funding.
I think what also helps us take such big steps is, unlike some schools, we didn't have the huge dips to recover from. Some of that was already there, and the ESSER's money
Great
simply
point.
allowed us to
Strengthen.
strengthen and accelerate in it, so it always helps to do well to begin with.
It's a great point.
Keep us posted, cause I'd like to know more about that whole 7th grade
Mm-hmm.
anomaly and get them back on track for the 9th graders.
And if talking about that equity thing needs to happen quicker than later, if that's what needs to happen, that's something we need to talk about. And whatever you need from the board to kind of get some of that stuff moving, please present that as well.
That was the one new program I put in my notes, add that piece.
We need to know. We're at that point, right? We need to know.
Well, I think if as a board, we all agree that that's the part that's missing, that's the data, we need, then
Well, I think
that's
that's
where
the
we
clear
go.
part. You see, we see the struggle, now we do know who it is. So let's figure it out, let's get down to it, and whatever you need from us, let's talk about it.
don't make too many promises too fast.
Whatever Idette says is
Talking
fine.
about it.
That's
Thank
great,
you.
thank you.
Are
Great,
those all of our
thanks so much.
questions?
Yeah.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Hunsinger.
Good evening. This will be pretty brief, I believe. So we have a new agreement with the IU, and I wanted to explain it to you since it is new. The IU also had received ESSER funding, and they have allocated monies to all the school districts in the IU. And our share of that ESSER funding, which is flowing through the IDEA grant, is $182,000. $42,000 of that will flow directly to us, and then we're going to be using that money to offset some of the costs for special education salaries. And then the other $140,000, the IU is actually going to keep, but they're going to use those monies to offset the cost of services that they provide to us through our contract for services with them. So again, this is a new agreement. We wanted to explain it to you, but I don't need any action this evening. We can roll it on to the consent agenda for next week. But any questions, any thoughts? Pretty,
I'm trying to.
Do you all know what IDEA is?
Yeah.
Okay.
What is it, like from a year standpoint, what are our costs usually for the IU? Like what does that mean in numbers for us, the 140 applied to them? What does that cover?
rather small.
Okay.
Yeah, Sarah and I will be giving you an overview of special education costs come April, but I was actually just working on some of those costs for the budget for today. And not always the greatest with recall on numbers because I look at them all day long and I don't want to get them all confused, but
It's a very small portion though.
yeah, that's a very small portion of our overall cost.
It's nice though to get money, pass-through money coming our way.
Yeah.
It usually passes through to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the nice thing about this too is we already had these costs budgeted, so this money that we're getting is, just a surplus for us.
There's always a place to put it.
We'll always take it.
Yeah. And spend it someplace worthwhile.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Mr. Appleby. You want to replace our Sapphire system? And you're Mr. Hill?
Introduce it.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, board. So,
Can you kind of give a brief update of the process that we went through?
Absolutely.
To select Power School.
So good evening, board. With us tonight is Joel Hill from Power School, who's going to give you a presentation. So over about the course of the last year, we've been evaluating at the district possibility of replacing out our Sapphire student information system, kind of hitting a point where it's kind of critical to look at its longevity, looking at other districts, what they've been doing with their student information system, looking at the future and what we can do with regards to that. So we actually looked at kind of a broad spectrum 30-some, give a set in on a CCIU presentation for a number of SISs. Out of that, we kind of came back and said we'd like to look at these three. Kind of took their model, did our own like mini SIS evaluation. We did that back in June. And then from that, we kind of got as much information as possible from who we could around the district. It was a busy time over the summer. And then ultimately, as administration and cabinet kind of sat down and looked at all the options and really the pros and cons, and kind of the clear winner out of that was Power School. And then, so Joel's gonna kind of give you a little presentation of what the real benefits are, kind of give him some target things. I'm sure you've heard a lot of the questions you just asked about data and audits and everything else. That's the kind of information that's very helpful, because when we start looking at the products to replace out our SIS, having something that's gonna allow us to get as much information and have that data as accurate as possible, that's kind of like at the top, and then other elements of that. So I'm happy to discuss further, but I'm not here to talk to you about Power School. That's what Mr. Hill's gonna do, so I'm gonna hand it off to him.
Thanks, Josh. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Thank you for allowing me to present tonight. As Josh said, my name is Joel Hill. I am Power School's Senior Account Manager for the state of Pennsylvania. I've been with the organization for 9 years now. I work with all districts in PA with at least 3,000 students to evaluate anything under the Power School portfolio. I was an elementary school classroom teacher before coming to Power School, and I actually most recently taught at Elko before starting at Power School, and going to walk you through a little bit about the proposed change to your student information system tonight. So I will keep this as brief as possible. I know there is a lot in that slide deck. I will try to go through it, but know that it is more of a resource than anything for you. And feel free to get any questions to me through Dr. Z, through Josh, to get those addressed. Happy to take those. Perfect. So the first slide there, that kind of provides an overview of everything that Power School does. Under the Unified Operations section, we are specifically looking at the student information system, of course, the heartbeat of your school district. Also enrollment for new students coming on board, annual updates of information, and also flexible forms as well. Those are all encompassed in that unified operations portion of that wheel. We also do many other things that impact your classroom. Your teachers would be using these, including your student information system. Schoology is also a Power School application. So you are already a Power School customer today. This would be an expansion of that partnership. So other types of things we do up there: curriculum mapping, assessment, special education, behavior, college and career life readiness. The unified talent side there, that's everything as far as recruiting, applications, onboarding, professional development, evaluations, and so forth. And then that unified insights, kind of the wrapper on the candy bar, if you will, that is also on your proposal. And that goes hand in hand with what Dr. Kozer and Dr. Mann were presenting on as far as your equity audit goes. There can be filters on literally anything you want in there. So you can slice and dice the data any way you want for that equity audit. Also, it includes a risk analysis portion, which will allow you to specifically for CV, looking at the chances that a student's not going to graduate. And that algorithm is specific to your district. It's not pulling from a national data lake or anything like that. It's specific to CV, and it can encompasses an MTSS module as well. So from what they were presenting on, this is exactly what should help with those types of activities. So that's everything Power School does. This slide here was more to give you an overview, if you check this out over the weekend, of what a student information system does. So I'm not going to spend time focusing on each one of those. So we're going to look at this through 3 lenses, your different personas, how this is going to positively impact your parents and students, the teachers, and your school staff. And we'll start with parents, then we'll go to the teachers, then we'll go to the school staff. So the family experience. So we're going to provide a portal for them to get visibility into things like student achievement, attendance, communication with teachers, being able to see multiple students if they have more than one kid at CV, all at one login. Go ahead, Dr. Z. So this provides you a real-time summary of what you're going to see as you log in as a parent. You can see there their grades. Out to the right, their attendance is marked there. Parents can immediately contact any of their teachers via the email right there in the middle. Out to the left, a navigation bar of the various places that you can go in this portal. And you can see up top, Daryl and Katie are listed because this parent has 2 children in the district, so they can just toggle between their 2 students without logging in a second time. This is digging into another piece of the same screen where you can check your assessment scores, whether they be standards-based grades or traditional grades. And this is showing that for Daryl Nader, the student here that is on screen, you can see 3 years. You can see 17, 18, 18, 19, and 19, 20. This is to illustrate that as students matriculate through CV, a parent would be able to see literally from kindergarten through 12th grade the history of all scores. And you can see even the percentages there are links. So anything blue is a link to dive deeper as well. And sorry, Dr. Z, one more thing up there. Also, view graduation progress is available to them, so they can track how their student is tracking towards whatever tracks that you have, whether it's, CTC type credits, whether it's, typical high school graduation. You can set up tracks and you can see how they're progressing with their current courses requested, and so forth. Speaking of course requests, this is where parents and students would do the course requests. And of course, those course requests can have prerequisites tied to them, whether it be a grade, a percentage, teacher recommendation. Any of those types of things enable the student to actually request that course. Our customers love our mobile app. It is available on Android and Apple devices. It provides real-time look at many different items that we're going to see in the next couple slides. Go ahead. You can see things such as grades, GPA, student fees, schedule, assignments, attendance, all of those types of activities right on your phone. It's just another option if you don't want to pull up your laptop, your desktop computer. Also mobile forms as well. So this would give you the ability to collect information from your families on anything you want. Whether it's going to update information in the student information system or you just want to collect that information. It can be available in any language you want, and it can allow you to collect fees, collect attachments, like if you want a picture of something from a family, you can collect the picture. This is the same system you would use for enrolling students as well. And you can think of forms such as transportation changes, absence notices, athletic registration forms, literally any form you want to create, put out to students.
How many languages do you support?
I'm sorry?
How many languages do you support?
Any language you want for this.
Any.
Any language you want. Now,
Okay.
PowerSchool does not provide the language translation for these forms, so it would need to be entered, but it can support any language, and then it can be toggled by the family.
Okay.
And it's no additional cost to add additional languages. I mentioned that our customers love this, and the numbers speak for themselves. 460,000 ratings with a 4.5 out of 5 star rating. Down below that are our 3 next closest competitors for their student information system mobile app, highest being a 1.8. So I can tell you it's great, but 460,000 other people said it's pretty great. The teacher side, this can be quick because honestly, your teachers are not going to be very impacted by this. Reason being, they're using Schoology. Schoology is your learning management system. Your grades from Schoology will automatically be passed back to the student information system. So they do not need to come here to do duplicate entry of those grades. They will come over from Schoology. Both traditional grades and standards-based grades will come back to this grade book. And really the only reason they're going to come here is at the end of the quarter, check out, make sure the grades are what they should be, and finalize them. And then they're ready for report cards. One more, Dr. Z. Perfect. So I said you're going to be doing a lot of this in Schoology, your teachers will, that is. They can also take attendance over here. So no need to go to the student information system anymore to take attendance. Whether they want to take it in a seating chart view as what you see on screen or a list view, that can also be done inside of Schoology. So lots of benefits, but the most important one is that first one, integrated fully with Schoology. And finally, for your school staff. Whenever they come in here, it's a customizable view, but I just want to point out, if you scroll up just a hair higher, up, just a little bit there. This is a customizable view. It has navigation out to the left that is clean and streamlined. There's a search bar up at the top that is predictive, so as your administrators are starting to learn the system, they can type in a page they're looking for, they can start typing in a student's name, it will predict what they're going to type and give them options to save them a couple seconds, each time they want to access something. Also, in the center there, you see a current selection of 361 students. One thing that's unique about PowerSchool SIS is you pick a group of students and they follow you around through the entire system. So let's say the football team is leaving early for an away game. You type in there on your search, the football team, you pick those kids, and in 2 clicks, you pick to change those students' attendance to early dismissal. That's how quick it is. It's called group functions. Go ahead, Dr. Z. So we provide many different reports. This is a list of the types of reports. This is going to be everything from report cards and transcripts to mailing labels. We provide over 150 reports out of the box. And then that enterprise reports is basically a fancy Excel, but it's built into the system using all of your student information system data to create any type of chart, graph that you want with that data without pulling it out into another system. We provide a very flexible, easy to use master scheduler that we can really take on just about any schedule. We can do up to 99 periods in a single school day. We can do 26-day rotations, and we can do 12ths of a school year, all in the same master schedule with constraints, with parameters, with student avoids, with teacher-student avoids, all of those types of things. It goes through millions of scenarios, and typically you're getting between 80 and high 90s% on your load of that data to create the schedule. Here's an example of 2 transcripts, but just know this can look any way you want. So you can pull in, there's even a student picture on there if you want to pull that in. Any data you want to put on that transcript, you can. We also have what's called Power Source Exchange, where our clients will put out their transcripts. So you can pull one down, tweak it, and make that your own. This goes for much more than just transcripts. I'm talking about report cards, other plugins to the system. It's very, very flexible. Your advisors and counselors will love this graduation plan progress. It's just like the parents have, so whenever the kids come in for a counseling appointment, you can see exactly where they are on track for that high school diploma. Our reporting and compliance, state reporting and compliance, I should say, is very strong. This will help your new registration and child accounting specialist coming in. We are essentially giving them an easy button out of the gate, because as information is typed into the PowerSchool student information system, it is doing a real-time audit of that against all the Pennsylvania business rules that would throw an error as you do your state submission. This is particularly on a per student basis. Right here, we're looking at 1 student, but we also give you a screen that runs at K-12 across all of your students to make sure that the data is clean before you ever do a state submission. Interoperable platform, we play well with other independent software vendors. Some of our integrations are so deep that our users don't even know they're connecting to a third party because it is just embedded into the student information system. We take security very seriously with our certifications. Our hosting is through Microsoft Azure. We have many policies in place, things that I need to go through yearly to get certified on, and a full staff of security personnel that is their only job, is to make sure that we are the most secure provider that we can be. This is a couple slides on the implementation process. Go ahead, Dr. Z. Basically, from the time it is signed off on, this is a 6 to 9 month process, and we will get you up and live for back to school 23-24. One more slide. And here's a timeline of how we do this. We've done it literally thousands of times around the world. We're in over 80 countries. It's a tried and true process, and if you would like to read more about it, in the proposal itself, starting on page 4, it gets into the nitty-gritty. Starting on page 7, it actually breaks out our responsibilities, the district's responsibilities, and the milestones of the project. And you can see our numbers are growing in Pennsylvania every year. We have not lost customers, we grow. We are in over 200 public school districts today and over 100 charters in PA today with a very active user group as well. And all told, we have over 400 clients in Pennsylvania today, including CV. As I mentioned, you are a Schoology customer today. Kept it as short and sweet as I could for you. Questions?
If we get hacked, what do you do?
If we get hacked, we have a full team and we do notify the districts if anything like that would happen. But we have the architecture set up that basically they have to hack Microsoft in order for that to even be a possibility. And Microsoft, biggest cloud provider of services in the world. So we are with the absolute best. Nothing is here on site, on a machine, on a computer. Everything is up in the cloud. And, we have an entire team that they're watching those servers that access all day long. And it is set up that if something would happen, not only are you notified, but the detection essentially cuts it off as soon as it would come in. Should have something happen like that.
And I don't know.
We recently implemented multi-factor across the board. Sapphire, we're still waiting. PowerSchool.
I've heard about Sapphire since we first started
I know.
with it. It's been a constant, there's always been some issue with it. Every time something changes, they don't adapt. I understand that. I have no problem with changing if something is better. My other question, and maybe this is more for Josh, how much of our staff time is going to be invested in making this transition?
So, there's gonna be a considerable amount of time on everybody's part, but I would say that it's equally distributed. So on the teacher side, administrative side, it's gonna be on the training. If you were to look at what Joe proposes, the timeline, there's a lot of components initially where my team will take care of pulling out the data from Sapphire, getting it into PowerSchool, and then we would rely on the administrators to look through and say, can you check the boxes, make sure that the information is there in the appropriate location? And then once they do that, we kind of keep going through the steps of that. That's in that initial portion, but that's really kind of getting it there to get off the ground running. And then it's the training, it's the getting everybody on board. It's a lot more intuitive than our current system, so.
Don't say intuitive, I don't believe any of that.
They have an app, that makes me happy. But as Joel talked about, one of the real big highlights of PowerSchool, we already have Schoology.
Yeah.
And a lot of what our teachers have had to do in the past is we direct them to use Schoology for learning management, but then they go to Sapphire for attendance and grading and looking at health reports and all of this component. A lot of that over here now gets fully tied into the system. So we're really just adding into what they're already comfortable with. So that makes the learning curve much more acceptable to the teachers, so that they're really living in the system they've been wanting to do that, so.
And back to my original point, how much extra time, effort is going to be involved in your department?
Whatever it takes.
That's not, are we talking about bringing in extra staff to help do that work, to carry that load? Or are we just talking extra hours? Are we talking about sacrificing our other services while this gets done?
No sacrificing. A lot of that, like I said, is getting the data out, moving it over. It's probably more on my plate to plan it out and to get everybody in a room. But it's one of those, we have the opportunity to do something with the ESSER funding, so that's kind of where the target is. We have the money to do this kind of heavy lift of a transition. It just happens to be in between building projects, so I'm okay with that. From my team and our standpoint.
ESSER funds, you mean to bring in extra help to do the work, to temporary help?
If it gets to the point, I would be more than happy to ask. I don't expect us to need to do that. Largely because Power School is gonna provide us a project manager. They're gonna do a good portion of the information on their side to make sure it works. I'm gonna be the bad guy. I'm gonna be the one saying,
I
okay,
heard that.
my customer's expected to do this. Joel, why doesn't it do this? Or the project manager. And then I'm gonna be like, you have 4 days to get back to me on an answer, and you have 7 days to solve it. I'm gonna be that kind of a bad guy. The reason is, it's so imperative that we do this well, and that we take everything and move it over. So, I'll just attest this, I've already told Dr. Z since the beginning, I don't make the decision on this. I will facilitate it, I'm happy to do that, but it was up to the district to really kind of drive the direction on that decision. Because it's the, excuse me, it's the end users, it's the admins and the teachers that live in the data system. I will tell you, going to something like a Power School, for what my team does on a daily basis with data and new account creation, it's actually much easier for us. Power School builds into everything. So what takes a nightly sync to create accounts across 13 different systems is now an API that does it in practically real time. So if a kid enrolls in the morning and is in the building, like that information is processed much faster. I don't have to wait for nightly sync. So there's a lot of the tie-ins that are really gonna actually save us time in the long run. So we gain something from the tech department, teachers gain something, and then the administrators ultimately, once they're in the system, if you've seen like their demo on scheduling, that's huge just from the principal standpoint at the high school, just being able to have it auto matrix the most efficient form of a schedule.
Does any of this apply to some of the reports that have to come out of administrative office?
What it's gonna do is streamline the state reporting.
That's what I meant.
Yes, Power School does a great job with that.
Yeah.
And I like that that Power School system checks for errors before we send it.
So if you have several reports with the same information, it'll make sure they're all consistent.
Yeah, make sure it's good data going out.
Yeah, I would add that given your timeline for approval, it also helps to your question, will you need additional staff? If you were approving this in, say, February or March, I would say Josh might need a couple extra hands on staff, but I'm confident that, seeing the timeline right here, that you would be good with your current staff. Additionally, you can see in month 3, customer begins PD plus training. That is an asynchronous learning management system specifically on how to use Power School applications. So it is basically giving your teachers, your administrators access to coursework that is a click-by-click walkthrough of how to use the system with a knowledge assessment at the end in month 3. So after the system is set up and configured, we get you on there and you have that much time before the next school year to do whatever you need to do, in addition to live sessions, of course, as well.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some extra training for our teachers this year yet, this school year, to be ready for next school year.
But
I know how
again,
over the
with,
summer too, right?
Summer as well.
So
but again, with how you are using Schoology, that will minimize that as much as
It'll be more
possible. If you
familiar.
were to go to any other student information system, it would not be that case.
are these is there a way to connect information from school to school, from district to district, like when we get a transfer?
Not particularly, I mean, the nice
That's
piece
the
is what we're
security
gonna get,
problem,
that
isn't it?
data validation is really gonna help to make sure as it's going in, because it's an enrollment, it's going to go in correctly.
Okay. They like it.
You want me to go down my list?
Excuse me?
Do you want me to go down my list?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, all right, perfect. Athletics. Okay, interested in that piece. Nothing is more exciting than filling out the same PIAA form every
Yes.
single year.
Right?
You know, is that a yes, Dr. Kozer? Okay. I would love for the athletic director and you to get together and to see how can we make that easier for parents?
Yep.
To just update changes?
Yeah,
Rather
sure.
than the same info? Now, I know you might have HIPAA requirements, I'm not sure, because if you're uploading physicals and things of that nature, so just something to think about.
Yep.
If you're involved, I'm okay. If you're not gonna be involved, I won't be okay, just to let, you know, I know you have a lot of things going on, but I know it's more of a data extract, make sure it's validated, and then a data input from that perspective.
Yep.
I get that. I would go live over the summer. I would not go live during the school year. If you could backtrack
Right.
that, I don't know if that's possible or not.
Yes.
But I don't want it to be summer where it's a week before school starts, please.
So our plan is, while we're also doing the data integration and the training, it's kind of an opportunity where they can play in the
Mhm.
sandbox
Yep.
throughout the course of the spring. As we're, we've already had the discussions, where do we build the schedule? We're gonna build the schedule in Sapphire.
Yep.
Well, we're gonna have it in Power School, moved over, so when school starts in August, it's what we're running from.
Sure.
So there's it's not even the summer, we're gonna start talking in the spring, really going in and doing a lot
That's
of
fine.
that.
And I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And one of the benefits of doing that with the scheduling is that's one thing to take off your administrator's plate for this initial year, is they don't have to learn how to schedule in a new student information system.
Sure.
We can do that next year, but we're gonna import what's coming in there. Did you have something else on
I do.
athletics? Cause I'd have something to add to that.
Just wanna make sure that is just a great button, a feature to have per student, and
Also
it's web-based.
Yeah, we're gonna be looking at things like fines, fees, and meals,
Mhm.
and being able to have a centralized payment system.
That's fine, that's
through the
good.
app, things like that.
Rather than just getting on the K-12.
Yep, it'll still be a separate processing system, but
Yeah.
it'll be, as Joel talked about, one of those almost invisible integrations.
Sure.
That you're gonna be on the app or the website.
That's fine.
Yep.
And the big thing, your biggest hurdle is not gonna be staff, it's not gonna be teachers, et cetera, it's gonna be parents.
Mhm.
Because that's our biggest hurdle now, to get them on Schoology from that. So think about a communication plan,
Oh, yeah.
thinking about back to school nights, et cetera, letting the parents get it done earlier rather than later. That seems just to be a struggle.
So I would have.
Yep, good.
You're good? Okay, let me take parent night. Okay, so first one for athletics, absolutely. We have athletics registration forms as a starting point. So that will help out your athletic director and Josh get that how you want it to be. And as you mentioned, that athletics registration, we already know the kid's name, address, phone number, birthday. There's no reason that should be entered. That will pre-populate on that form.
It's all manual now, actually.
Okay, well, there's no reason it needs to be.
Exactly.
So it will all be pre-populated. They can upload a picture of that physical if you want them to. They can do an electronic sign-off. If it's for, let's say, football and you have a concussion protocol type of waiver or something like that, it can be sent or available to the student and their guardian, but the student has to sign off and the parent can't access that part, and the parent can sign off and the student can't access that part. So they would both have to actively go into that form and electronically sign that they've read and acknowledged all of that. So absolutely, we can take that. For parent night, absolutely, there will be discussions with your project manager, with your application specialist that'll do the training as far as what that looks like. We have different flavors, if you will, across the district. I had mentioned we're over 200 school districts, public school districts in PA using Power School SIS. We have over 225 using the Schoology learning management system. Some districts will do pretty much everything inside of Schoology. Some districts will use both. Some districts will rely more on the student information system portal. It's all discussions about how you want that to be rolled out for your staff or for your teachers.
As long as Josh is project, I'm assuming you're volunteering as project manager, I'm assuming. Yay, I'm good with that.
That's all.
And I think one of the things I've always learned when I do major integrations with ERP type systems, the more you customize it, the more problems you have type of thing. I'd love to kind of start with what we have, et cetera, and not customize it.
Sure.
Because everybody has needs, wants, and wishes from that aspect of it. But I'd rather have people work around the process rather than have the process work around people's perceived needs.
Implementation, operation, then customization.
The good news there is the way the system is set up, the architecture of it, it is the most customizable SIS on the market.
That's more reporting, right? Or is that just customizable just in general?
I'm just saying in general, anything you wanna customize, database schema, you can customize it. But it is the architecture is such that what you would customize cannot break the system. It kind of sits on top of what it needs to be. You can't break that. So I had mentioned our customers will put out report cards, transcripts, and that type of thing for you to pull down and use how you want. Same thing for changes to the way a page displays in the system. They can put those out there. You pull them down and put them on your system. It'll just be the way the data is rendered, but you can't break the system by customizing it. And to that, you'd mentioned about ERP systems. Yeah, down the road, maybe if we want to do finance, HR, payroll, we can help you out there too.
I'm sure you can. That's good. That's my concerns. I'm fine.
Can the parents, at the start of a school year with a kindergartner, download the app, sign in, do it all from the app? Or do they have to go online, set up the thing, then download the app and do that and all that kind of stuff?
They do not need to.
Okay.
So the way this would happen, in your proposal is what's called Enrollment Express. And that will allow you to do new student registration and annual updates of information. If it's an annual update, of course, it's gonna be everything's pre-populated. Click next, you're done your re-enrollment, hopefully before the school year begins. For a new family coming on, you would have a link from your district website, they would click that link, and they would have a skeleton kind of enrollment form to get the basics. And what that's really looking for is, has this student been a CV student before, so that you're not creating a duplicate. Once they get through that step, it will come to your new registrar, and then they will be able to say that, yep, that's legit, you may proceed. That family will get their login instructions to get into the portal, into the app, to complete the registration process. And really what we found is by doing it that way, you're getting buy-in because they're getting into the system that they're gonna check the grades and attendance straight out of the gate. It also makes you look a lot more tech forward than doing things on paper.
Because initially I will say, you guys kind of had me at 4 tabs for my 4 kids and I can just click on it.
Wait, Sapphire doesn't do that?
Just trying to after listening to my wife have to deal with trying to register a kindergartner now for the 4th time, that's a nightmare and it's a pain and it's awful. So that alone would be, I can see how intuitive it would be for parents. That's a huge selling point because it just streamlines the whole process for them too.
This is not a deal breaker because I know we're getting something, it's an improvement, but compared to what we were paying annually.
So, Dr. Z actually asked this question, and I kind of spelled out like this. So currently we pay about $70,000 a year for Sapphire. But that's just the SIS side, that doesn't include all the additional components. So then you would look at something like On-Hand Schools as the data reporting piece that Dr. Mann really kind of relies on, that pulls from that, and that's close to another $40,000. So when you add all that up, we're almost on par for what the annual would be. But then there's so much more we're also getting that I think like that little bit of that difference is really gonna be.
So it's pretty much on par.
Yep.
Just for your general information, I take exception to your report showing something as an ongoing cost with a number, like every year that's what it costs. And then below that, using the euphemism, oh, by the way, that doesn't include annual uplifts.
Yes, ma'am.
Come right out and tell us every year this will go up.
Yes, ma'am, understood.
I found that to be insulting, I wouldn't catch that.
Do we pay
Understood.
for Schoology now annually?
You pay Schoology through the Lancaster Lebanon IU.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that is at a PA-IU discounted rate. Every district in PA same.
So that
every
stays the
district in
same,
PA
right
stays
where it
the same.
is?
Yeah.
But then we just bring
Are
this
you
up
trying to
instead
get
of
the
overarching.
IUs to switch?
To switch. We basically have a contract with the IU that any district can buy Schoology at the same rate across the state. That is the same for our assessment management platform and our curriculum mapping and lesson planning platform. All are through the CAIU contract. Everybody can pay the same rate for Schoology, and then the other ones are based upon your enrollment.
If we were to approve this month, are you ready to get started in December such that month 7 is next June?
Yes. Yep, the Power School SIS implementations for 23-24 started October 2nd or 3rd, whatever the first business day of October is. That's how it works every year for the following school year, back to school. So yes.
Please field any additional questions.
So will this be on next week's agenda? Okay.
Yes, this
It'll
will
be
be
on
on
consent.
the
That's fine.
consent agenda.
That's fine.
Any other questions?
I can't think of anything.
All right.
Thank
you very much.
Appreciate
Appreciate it.
your time.
Yeah, thanks
Where
for
are the
that.
right colors, Joel?
I do always wear school colors. Dr. Z and Josh, I said, probably wonder why I always wear the same thing, but I always wear school colors. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's the last of that part of the agenda. Next week's tentative agenda, I don't know how filled out it is right now. I will remind you that we will be reviewing policy 123 next week. The update on 129 is, we'll go into that later. PSBA is not coming out with a new policy. I don't know why. They know there's changes to be made. That's the public input. I spoke with Stuart Nade last week, wanted to get him before he retired, and Mike Levin, their outside counsel, wrote those 3 articles. They took it to policy, they took it to Stuart, who's the internal legal expert. He made no suggested changes, and it's just sitting there, so it's up to us to simply make the changes we feel we need to make. That's part of something larger. Any questions on next week's agenda?
You're still doing the forum, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we're still in the forum. We can go into details about that planning later.
Where's that location at? The forum?
It'll be in the high school auditorium.
High school auditorium, perfect,
High school auditorium.
Yes.
perfect. Okay.
Okay, yeah. I requested that we stay near so we could do our board meetings here. I do not like board meetings on the stage. They just don't work well.
No.
Is there anyone in the public at this point that would like to address the board? Then board initiatives and concerns. I would just like to remind us all that this weekend is Extra Give. Our Education Foundation is one of the several hundred for those of you that are interested in doing that. Remind you again of our senior breakfast. Please put that on your calendars. And you already got your insurance form, so I don't have to remind you about that. I will remind you that I asked Mr. Talley to head our recommendations for officer nominations. He will be reporting that next week. I just want to remind you that we will vote on that report, but we will be voting to accept it. I'm sorry. Yeah, to accept it, not to adopt it. There is a difference. All this does is put that name in nomination automatically. That still gives anyone who has second thoughts or is interested, who wants to be additionally considered. We would appreciate if you'd let us know if that's your plan, to put another name up for consideration, just so we make sure we're prepared to follow the proper procedure. Okay, other than that, we'll wait to see what that is, and you will be reporting that next week, right?
I will.
Okay. If there's no other comments, I will entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session for legal and personnel reasons.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are